Hello, I'm David Penn, Research Analyst with Finovate. We're here at FinovateSpring 2022 in San Francisco, California. And joining me today is Wendy Cai-Lee. She's the founder and CEO of Piermont Bank. Hi, Wendy. Thanks for joining us.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Sure. I thought we could start off by having you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do for the bank.
Sure. So I'm the founder CEO of Piermont Bank. Piermont is probably a new name to most of you because we are a first digitally native FDIC insured bank. Yes,
excellent.
in the whole country.
That's
Yes.
fantastic,
Yeah.
fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit about your decision to launch the bank? When did you start it, and sort of what was the decision behind it?
Sure. So the genesis of building Piermont was actually really simple. You know, a lot of entrepreneurs would tell you they had this grand vision. You know, for me, it was actually quite just very two practical reasons. One is that first was, this was back in 2016.
Okay.
Just seeing the impact and the speed of the impact and the just overall volume in terms of fintechs were making on consumer banking, that conversion rate, right? Because early on it was started with, well, they're just taking the unbankable or less desired customer. Well, no, that changed really quickly. The second reason is really, I've been in banking for 26, 27 years. It was just seeing the same pain points repeatedly from both the customer as well as internally as an operator, right? It's the same issue. So often, I say it to colleagues as well, myself, like how often have I found myself saying that, well, there's gotta be a better way, but how often do we get to do something about it? And if we do, how long does it take and what kind of effort requires to actually make a real change and have that full adoption take place?
Right.
So basically said, okay, this is going too slow. If I can start with a blank slate, how would I build this? How would I build a full digital native, totally tech-enabled bank to do commercial banking faster and more efficient? And that makes common sense too, right? Like, it's all about being relevant to your end customer. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You mentioned 2016, and I'm curious in terms, you mentioned that you've had quite extensive multi-decade experience in the banking industry. And I'm curious if you sort of pull back and you look over, say, the past 10 years, which includes the time just before you started Piermont, what would you say have been some of the main changes that have characterized it from that pulled out perspective over the past 10 years if you're going to look at it?
Just overall, the speed of changes, the speed of innovation, right?
Okay.
I just came off of a panel talking about even further acceleration. I think that's something that I would say, at least for my industry historically, change doesn't go that fast, right? So these days, I say, if the CEO is still working off of their 3-year strategic plan, if it's in their 3rd year, the board should fire that person. Because are you still even relevant in terms of whether it's your products and the way that you're delivering these products? So I think the biggest thing is just the speed. The speed of changes, the speed of innovation. Yeah.
It's really interesting with banking. You think of it as an industry, a field where some of its inherent conservatism was a virtue in many respects. The people sort of praised the idea that banks are slow, cautious, conservative, don't move fast. And now you find that virtue really becoming a vice as banks are increasingly being forced to have to change by competition with each other, fintechs, big tech, and that sort of thing. So it's a really interesting turnaround, it seems, that a lot of bankers are going to have to make.
So I tell my team, it's fast and steady.
Okay.
So, to what you said, right? Banking, actually, I was taught that, and it's still true. Banking is a risk management business.
Right.
So it's a little bit counterintuitive if you think about it to so-called innovation, right? But you absolutely can innovate in a risk management business. So how do you do it? You do want to be fast, you do want to be relevant, but you do it steady. That's how you can ensure that execution actually goes right.
Right, which is critical, absolutely critical. I want to talk about something else that I found really interesting, looking a little bit about your background, that you're involved in a number of organizations that have to do with helping women in financial services achieve leadership roles. You're part of the New York State Committee for the Advancement of Women in Leadership in Financial Services. You lead a fintech task force on that committee. I'm curious some of the initiatives that you all have been involved in that have kind of helped advance the cause of women in financial services.
Sure. There are so many causes out there that we can all champion, right? Especially given all these not so great events that are taking place these days. So for me, I would say that in terms of my own personal experience and my skill set, where I can make the most impact is to champion, whether it's health, education, work-life balance, right? Career progression for women, because I have personal experience that I can contribute. So I would say that outside of this more regulatory so-called committees and environment, I find myself able to make the biggest dent, biggest impact, is the day-to-day.
Okay.
Is really, hire truly based on skill sets and meritocracy. Right? Be gender blind, age blind. I know that sounds weird, but if as an executive, as somebody who's doing the hiring, as somebody who's doing the promotion, if I can just take that out and just say, is this person the best person for the job?
Right.
That's more than half the game. I know that sounds almost not, like I said, not very inspiring or trailblazing, but it is actually the day-to-day that makes a huge difference. Like, empower women, give them the job opportunity, give them the opportunity to rise to the occasion. That's how we get there. It's almost like getting like one person at a time versus going to a conference and just give a grand speech or motivational speech. But it's literally giving people the opportunity, right? So.
Yeah. It's very interesting. And I thought that the points you make about picking people based on merit, it's interesting. A lot of folks bristle when they hear ideas of meritocracy, but it seems to me that was sort of the point, was that if we can sort of clear that away and just look at the qualifications, we're going to start finding out that the woman who had 10 years of experience wasn't getting the opportunity that maybe the man who had 7 years of experience wasn't. So often by focusing on the merit, that is an empowering thing that gets us to where we want to go, as opposed to fearing it in some respects.
Because again, personal experience, right? Often for two candidates, a man and a woman versus a woman, and when people do the assessment, for the man, they think about what he can do, what he said he can do. For the woman, it's about, has she done it? How has she done it? Was she good at it? Right? So for me, as the hiring manager, as the executive, is that, no, that should be equalized. And that's important. That's why I said it's just really going back to the day-to-day details, right? In the operational details, giving people that opportunity.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I thought to talk a little bit more about this issue of talent and attracting really good talent. One of the things we hear a lot about in technology is just how difficult it is and how much competition there is to get the top folks. And I would imagine that financial services, as it increasingly gets into some of these areas, is also having that same challenge, competing for some of the same sort of folks. Do you think that financial services companies, maybe not the fintech, but financial services companies can compete for some of that top talent they really need in order to innovate and to build technologically?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, we also bring a ton of experiences, good or bad. Right? It's almost like what not to do. And that learning, that training, the mentoring is absolutely important. Because especially with the pandemic, with everything being remote, that in-person learning that you learn on the job, you learn through hearing by just even in the hallway, that is so important, right? So the adoption also being relevant, because we often you hear people talk about making sure you build products, you do the UX, the client experience being relevant, right? But do we remember to be relevant to our own people? Do we understand what is important to them? Right? So as an example, when all the companies were talking about how to return to the office, right, last year, is it 2 days, is it 3 days? Do we make everybody go back? Do we not? Let's do a phase-in approach, A/B rotation. There were all sorts of things going on, right? And broadly covered by the media. What we choose to do, my HR head and I spend time is like, the most important thing is to give people that sense of stability. Because the whole environment with the pandemic already created a lot of anxiety, right? And then companies can't even tell you how you're going to be working going forward. So what we do is that we decided that we'll go out with one solution, and that's the permanent solution, so that people can have advance notice in planning, right? Childcare, like who's doing pickup, right? I have a 12-year-old, like that's important, right? Do I go back and hire a nanny? Do I find a care provider for my mother, for example, right? For people who have elderly care. So that was important. See, that's what my point. Put ourselves in their shoes, put management in their shoes, and are we doing things that are relevant to them? And that's important to attract talent, to retain talent. Right.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. It's really been great to be able to cover so many different aspects of what's going on in financial services, from the talent to the technology. And I thought maybe by way of wrapping up, we could talk just a little bit about what excites you most about financial services. We hear at FinovateSpring so many different ideas, technologies, innovations going on. What are some of the things that you, from the position that you have at the bank, really say, these are the things that I'm keeping my eye on?
It's finally moving. It's finally moving at a pace that I want to see. So that is exciting to us. I would say that there are just so many. It's the innovation, not just from a particular area, but it's across the board. We're seeing more and more new platforms for core platform for the bank, which is important, right? We no longer only have the option of the big three, so-called big three, FIS, FISA. Front-end user platforms, customer service tools, just across the board. So now it's really, as you can see, I am excited, genuinely excited about that, because it's now identifying what works for you. What works for you, Piermont in our case, our customers, right? And how do you put that together and integrate it in a way that it actually can make you do things, allow us to do it faster and better.
Right.
Yeah, so.
Fantastic. Very good.
I don't have to build it all. Everybody's building it, right?
Absolutely. That's a very good thing. Well, thank you again very much for spending some time with us today.
Yeah, of course. It's great to be here.
Great. Fantastic.
Yep.
And thank you for joining us as well.